I was standing in my own kitchen when my daughter Amanda screamed at me. "Don't you dare touch the food! My husband's family is coming!" Every single item in that refrigerator came from my wallet, bought with my money in my house. I just smiled and said nothing. I had learned that silence was sometimes the most powerful response. Amanda marched to the freezer, yanked it open, and the scream that tore from her throat could have shattered windows. Her face went white as fresh snow. She stumbled backward, staring, then turned and ran. I walked calmly to the freezer, my slippers shuffling across the tile floor I had mopped that morning. Inside, organized in clear plastic bags, were months of careful work. Bank statements, showing the withdrawals I never made. Photographs of documents with signatures that were not quite right. Copies of my checkbook with Amanda's handwriting, trying to mimic mine. Receipts for things I never bought. All of it frozen solid, preserved with dates and times, evidence that could not be altered or destroyed. My hands were steady as I looked at what I had collected. 6 months of detective work, all leading to this moment. It started so innocently. Amanda and her husband, Derek, showed up on my doorstep on a Tuesday evening last March. They needed a place to stay, just for 2 weeks, while they sorted out some financial trouble. Derek had lost his job, they said. The apartment lease was ending. They just needed a little time to get back on their feet. What kind of mother says no to her only child? 2 weeks became a month. A month became 3. And somewhere in that time, my home stopped being mine. It was small things at first. Amanda rearranging my kitchen cabinets because my system was inefficient. Derek taking over the remote control every evening. Amanda suggesting I might want to park my car on the street so they could use the garage. Little by little, I felt myself becoming a guest in the house my husband Gerald and I had bought 42 years ago. Then I noticed my bank balance was wrong. Just $200 missing. I thought maybe I had forgotten a bill. But then it happened again. $300 this time. I started keeping closer track. $500, $800. Always round numbers, always from my checking account. I found Amanda in my home office one afternoon, going through my filing cabinet. She jumped when I walked in, laughed it off. "Just looking for a pen, Mom." But my important documents had been moved. My will, which left everything to Amanda, was on top of the stack. It had been at the bottom before. That same week, I ran into my neighbor Phyllis at the grocery store. She gave me this look, full of pity and concern. She asked how I was feeling. I said I was fine. Why? She hesitated, then said Amanda had mentioned I was having some memory problems, forgetting things, getting confused. I felt ice water run down my spine. I went home and really started paying attention. Amanda telling the mailman I sometimes forgot to take my medication. Amanda mentioning to the handyman that I had wandered outside in my nightgown last week. None of it was true, but she was planting seeds, building a narrative. So I started building my own case. I photographed every document before Amanda could access it. I kept copies of every bank statement. I recorded conversations on my phone when Amanda thought I was just checking messages. I gathered evidence like a lawyer preparing for trial, and I froze it all, literally, because I knew Amanda would look everywhere else, but she would never think to check the freezer behind the frozen peas. I heard Derek's footsteps pounding down the stairs. What happened? Where's Amanda? I turned to look at him. Derek was a tall man, 6 feet 3 inches, with the kind of broad shoulders that made him look intimidating. But his eyes right now were confused, almost afraid. "Your wife just discovered I'm not as stupid as she thinks I am." Derek's face changed. The confusion melted away, replaced by something calculating. What did you do? I straightened my spine, all 5 feet 4 inches of me facing him down. I found the evidence of what you two have been doing, the theft, the forgery, the lies you have been spreading about my mental state. Derek took a step toward me. You can't prove anything. I held up one of the frozen bags. It's all right here. Every withdrawal Amanda made with my forged signature. Every fake document. Every lie. And copies are somewhere safe, with someone who will know what to do if anything happens to me. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Then I heard Amanda's voice from the living room, sweet as honey, talking on her phone. Yes. Hi. This is Amanda Peterson, calling about my mother, Ashley Peterson. I need to report a situation. My mother is having another episode. She's acting paranoid and confused. She's been hiding things in the freezer and making wild accusations about me stealing from her. No, I don't feel safe right now. Can you please send someone? My blood turned to ice. Adult Protective Services. She was calling Adult Protective Services. Amanda walked back into the kitchen, phone still in her hand, and the smile on her face was triumphant. Let's see whose story they believe, Mom. The concerned daughter who has been documenting your decline for months, or the confused old woman making paranoid accusations. Derek moved to stand beside her, and I realized they had planned for this. They had actually planned for the moment I would discover the truth. They were 3 steps ahead of me, and I had walked right into their trap. The social worker arrived 30 minutes later with a man she introduced as Mr. Holloway, a mental health evaluator from the county. Patricia was her name, and she had kind eyes that made me want to trust her. That was dangerous. Amanda had transformed in those 30 minutes. Her hair was pulled back neatly. She had changed into a soft blue cardigan that made her look nurturing. The tears on her face appeared genuine. Derek stood beside her, one hand on her shoulder, the picture of the supportive son-in-law, and then Frank and Diane walked in. Derek's parents, who Amanda said were coming for dinner, they had been part of the plan all along. Patricia sat down across from me at my own dining room table. Ashley, your daughter is concerned about you. She says you have been acting confused lately. Can you tell me what happened today? I took a breath. My daughter and her husband have been living in my house for 6 months. During that time, they have been stealing money from my bank accounts. I discovered evidence of forgery and theft, which I preserved in the freezer. When Amanda found it, she panicked. Amanda made a small, hurt sound. Mom, please, we've talked about this. You've been so stressed lately. I think you're just confused. I'm not confused. I have proof. Bank statements, forged signatures, everything. Patricia's voice was gentle. Can I see this proof? Of course. I stood and walked to the freezer. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I pulled open the door. Frozen bags of food stared back at me. Casseroles, soup, vegetables, no documents, no photographs, no evidence. I stood there, frozen myself, staring at my freezer. This isn't right. The evidence was here, right here. Amanda's voice was so sad. Mom, you did this last week too. You put casseroles in plastic bags and said they were important documents. We've been so worried about you. No, that's not what happened. Derek must have moved them while Amanda was distracting everyone. Mr. Holloway was writing notes. Ashley, do you remember what you had for breakfast this morning? What? Oatmeal. I had oatmeal. What does that have to do with anything? Just trying to assess your memory. Do you know what day it is? It's Friday. Friday, September 22nd. And I'm not confused. They're gaslighting me. Don't you see what they're doing? But I could see it in their faces. The professional concern, the sympathy. They thought I was a paranoid old woman making accusations against my devoted daughter. Frank spoke up then, his voice gruff, but not unkind. We've noticed Ashley seems different lately, more scattered. Amanda's been carrying a heavy load trying to take care of her. Diane nodded. It breaks our hearts to see it, but Amanda needs help. This is too much for one person to handle. Patricia looked at Amanda. How long have you noticed these changes? Amanda dabbed at her eyes. About 8 months. After Dad died last year, Mom just hasn't been the same. At first I thought it was grief, but it got worse. The paranoia started about 6 months ago. She accused our mailman of reading her letters. She thought the neighbors were spying on her. And now this, with the freezer. That's not true. None of that is true. But it was my word against 4 of theirs. 5, counting Derek, who stood there nodding sadly. Mr. Holloway closed his notebook. Patricia, I think we need to implement a temporary safety plan. Given the level of paranoia and the accusations against family members who are clearly trying to help, I'm concerned about Ashley's ability to make sound decisions right now. What does that mean? My voice came out higher than I intended. Patricia's smile was meant to be reassuring. It means we want to make sure you're safe, Ashley. Your daughter has been managing some of your affairs, is that correct? Amanda spoke up quickly. I have power of attorney, yes. Dad and Mom set it up years ago, just in case. I can show you the paperwork. She pulled out a document from her purse. It looked official, with my signature at the bottom. I had never signed it. But I could see my signature there, and I felt reality tilting sideways. Given the circumstances, Mr. Holloway said, I'm recommending a 72-hour observation period at Pinewood Assessment Center. It's a comfortable facility where we can do a proper evaluation. You want to put me in a home? My voice was shaking now. Just for observation, Patricia said. 3 days. Unless you feel you're a danger to yourself or others, in which case we could pursue involuntary commitment, but I'd rather not go that route. Amanda's eyes were gleaming behind her tears. Mom, please, we just want to help you. If you cooperate, this will all be over soon. If you fight it, you're just proving that you need more help. I looked around the table at all of them, at their concerned faces and their sympathetic eyes, and I realized that fighting this would only make me look more unstable. Amanda had built the perfect trap. The evaluation is scheduled for tomorrow morning at 9, Patricia said. I strongly encourage you to go voluntarily. It will look much better in the assessment. And if I refuse, then we'll need to petition for a court order. That's a much more difficult process, and it goes on your record. The voluntary route is better for everyone. I felt Derek's hand on my shoulder, heavy and threatening despite its gentle appearance. Amanda smiled at me across the table, and in her eyes I saw victory. Fine, I said quietly. I'll go. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my bedroom, the one Gerald and I had shared for 4 decades, and watched the sun come up. At 8:15, Derek knocked on my door to tell me it was time to go. I refused. I'm not going. Within 2 hours, Amanda had filed for emergency guardianship. I discovered this when a sheriff's deputy showed up at my door with court papers. There would be a hearing in 48 hours. I tried to access my bank account to hire a lawyer. My debit card was declined. I tried another card, also declined. Amanda had frozen all my accounts using that power of attorney. I called my sister Dorothy in Phoenix. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I left a message, trying not to sound desperate, asking her to call me back immediately. The hearing happened on Monday morning in a courtroom that smelled like old wood and broken dreams. I had a public defender named Sarah Chen who looked fresh out of law school and had clearly just been handed my file that morning. Amanda had a sharp-dressed lawyer named Mr. Brennan who had obviously been preparing for weeks. The judge was a middle-aged woman named Judge Martinez. She looked tired, like she had already heard a dozen cases that morning and mine was just another problem to solve. Mr. Brennan stood. "Your Honor, my client Amanda Peterson is seeking emergency guardianship of her mother, Ashley Peterson, due to concerning mental decline and inability to manage her own affairs. We have substantial evidence of paranoid delusions, financial mismanagement, and risk to her own well-being." He presented a binder of evidence. Photographs of me supposedly doing strange things. One showed me in my garden at night. I had been looking at the stars, something Gerald and I used to do together. But in the photo, carefully framed, I looked confused and lost. Another photo showed my kitchen table covered in papers. Those had been my bills, which I was organizing. But the photo made it look chaotic, like the scribblings of someone losing their grip on reality. There were medical records showing I had missed appointments. I hadn't missed them. Amanda had canceled them without telling me. But there they were, in official letterhead, showing a pattern of someone not taking care of themselves. Amanda took the stand. Her testimony was a masterpiece. She spoke about how hard it had been watching me decline, how she had moved in to help me, sacrificing her own independence to care for her mother, how I had become hostile and paranoid, accusing her of theft even though she was the one paying my bills. She cried at exactly the right moments. She smiled bravely when talking about her dedication. She was the perfect daughter facing an impossible situation. Derek testified next. He described finding me wandering outside at 3 a.m. in my nightgown. It never happened, but he said it with such conviction, such detail, that I could almost see it myself. Frank and Diane testified. They spoke about their concern, their worry. They had noticed changes when they visited. I seemed distant, confused. They supported Amanda completely. When it was my turn, Sarah asked me basic questions. I tried to explain about the theft, about Amanda's manipulation, but without evidence, I just sounded angry and paranoid. My hands were shaking. My voice kept rising. I could see the judge's expression shift from neutral to concerned. Mr. Brennan cross-examined me. "Mrs. Peterson, isn't it true that you called Adult Protective Services on yourself last Friday?" "No," Amanda called them. "But you were making accusations about your daughter stealing from you, correct? Because she was stealing from me. Do you have any proof of this theft?" "I did. It was in the freezer. But someone moved it." "Someone moved evidence you claim to have had?" "Yes." "Who would do that?" "My daughter and her husband." "I see. And you believe your daughter, who has power of attorney and has been paying your bills, is actually stealing from you?" "Yes. Do you see how that sounds, Mrs. Peterson?" I looked at the judge. I could see the decision forming in her eyes. Judge Martinez granted temporary guardianship to Amanda for 30 days pending a full psychiatric evaluation. Just like that, I lost control of my finances, my medical decisions, my housing. But Mr. Brennan wasn't done. "Your Honor, given Mrs. Peterson's current living situation and her hostile attitude toward my client, we request permission to sell the family home. The proceeds would be used to secure appropriate care for Mrs. Peterson." My heart stopped. Judge Martinez frowned. "That seems premature. Let's table that discussion until the next hearing after the psychiatric evaluation is complete." "Thank you, Your Honor," Mr. Brennan said smoothly. But he had planted the seed. After the hearing, I tried to call Dorothy again. Amanda intercepted my phone. I watched her answer it, watched her take the call into the hallway. When she came back, she was smiling. Dorothy sends her love. She says she hopes you feel better soon. I explained that you're sick, and we're taking care of it. She understands. You poisoned her against me. Amanda leaned close. I'm protecting the family, Mom. Dorothy doesn't need to worry about this. Neither does anyone else. You're going to go to Pinewood, get evaluated, and then we're going to have a very serious conversation about your future. Derek drove me to Pinewood Assessment Center that afternoon. Amanda sat in the front seat, chattering happily about their plans to renovate once the house sold. She used the word once, not if. I stared out the window at my town rolling past. The library where I had volunteered for 15 years. The park where Gerald proposed. The coffee shop where I met friends every Thursday. All of it slipping away. Pinewood Assessment Center was a low brick building surrounded by carefully maintained gardens. It was supposed to look welcoming. Instead, it looked like a place where people went to be forgotten. The intake nurse was a broad-shouldered woman named Janet, with a no-nonsense manner. She took my vital signs, asked me basic questions, and gave me a room on the second floor. The room had a single bed, a nightstand, and a window that looked out onto the parking lot. The door had no lock. "Welcome to Pinewood," Janet said. "Breakfast is at 7, lunch at noon, dinner at 5:30. There's a common room down the hall. Try to participate in the group activities. It helps with the evaluation. How long will I be here? That depends on Dr. Ramirez and what he finds. Usually the initial assessment takes about a week. A week. I had thought 72 hours, but I was learning that nothing worked the way I had been told it would. Dr. Ramirez came to see me that evening. He was a thin man in his 50s with kind eyes and a gentle voice that made me want to trust him. That was probably dangerous, too. He asked me questions. So many questions. What year is it? Who is the president? Can I count backward from 100 by sevens? Draw a clock showing 3:15? Remember these 3 words and repeat them back in 5 minutes. I answered everything correctly. I was not losing my mind. I was being systematically destroyed by my own daughter. "Tell me about your relationship with Amanda," he said. I told him everything. The theft, the manipulation, the lies. I tried to stay calm, tried to sound rational, but I could hear my voice getting more intense, more desperate. Dr. Ramirez wrote notes. "Have you been taking any medications, Ashley?" "No, I don't take any medications, just vitamins." He frowned at his file. "That's interesting. According to your medical records, you were prescribed several medications, an antidepressant, an anti-anxiety medication, and something for memory support. I've never taken any of those. I don't even know what you're talking about. It says here you stopped taking them about 6 months ago, around the time your daughter says your symptoms got worse. That's not true. I never started taking them because I was never prescribed them." But I could see the doubt in his eyes. The medical records said one thing, I said another, and I was the one being evaluated for mental instability. Amanda visited twice that week. The staff thought she was wonderful. She brought me fresh flowers. She held my hand. She spoke so kindly to the nurses about how worried she was. In the moments when we were alone, she showed her real face. "Just sign the house over, Mom. Make this easy. You can have a nice little apartment somewhere. A small allowance. You'll be taken care of. Fight me, and I'll make sure you never leave places like this. Why are you doing this? You're my daughter." Amanda's laugh was cold. "Dad left everything to you. Everything. Like I didn't matter. Like all those years I spent taking care of him when he was sick meant nothing. Well, guess what, Mom? I'm taking what should have been mine all along. Your father left me the house because we bought it together. We built our life there. He knew you were financially secure. You have a good job, a husband with a good job. Had a good job. Derek got fired 6 months ago. Did you know that? We're broke, Mom. Completely broke. That house is worth $450,000. That's my inheritance. That's my future. And I'm not letting you keep it from me. She stood to leave, smoothing her skirt. 2 years, she said. I've been planning this for 2 years. Since Dad died, I learned how to forge signatures. I found someone in medical records who owed me a favor. I created an entire paper trail showing your decline. Every single piece of evidence is in place. You can't win this. After she left, I sat on my narrow bed and tried not to cry. The other patients at Pinewood were genuinely impaired. There was a man named Walter who thought it was 1963. A woman named Sylvia who asked for her mother every hour. I didn't belong here, but the more I insisted I didn't belong, the crazier I sounded. I tried to convince Dr. Ramirez during our next session. He listened patiently, kindly. Then he showed me the medical records Amanda had submitted. They showed previous psychiatric hospitalizations, 3 of them dating back 10 years. Treatments for anxiety, depression, paranoid ideation, prescriptions from multiple doctors, a detailed history of mental health treatment. None of it was real, but it was all documented, official, impossible to fight. I never had any of those hospitalizations. Those records are fake. Dr. Ramirez set down his file. Ashley, I understand this is difficult, but denial is a common response to cognitive decline. The fact that you've stopped taking your medications is very concerning. That alone could explain the paranoid thoughts about your daughter. I'm not paranoid. I'm being abused. But he had already decided. I could see it in his face. Based on these records and your current presentation, I'm recommending long-term guardianship. I think you need more support than you're willing to accept right now. That afternoon, I overheard 2 staff members talking in the hallway. They didn't know I was in the common room, just around the corner. The Peterson woman in 214, one said. Her daughter is already making arrangements for memory care. Place called Meadowview Gardens. Nice enough, I guess. Poor thing, the other replied. But at least she has a daughter who cares. Some of these folks have nobody. I felt something break inside me. Amanda had already arranged for me to be transferred to a long-term facility. The house sale was proceeding. The guardianship would become permanent in less than a week, and I was trapped here, with no way out and no one to help me. That night, I lay in my bed and stared at the ceiling. I thought about Gerald, about the life we had built, about the daughter we had raised, who I thought I knew. Where had I gone wrong? How had I failed to see what Amanda really was? For the first time since this nightmare began, I considered giving up. Maybe it would be easier to just let it all go. Let Amanda have the house. Let her have the money. Let her win. Maybe I was too old, too tired, too broken to fight anymore. I closed my eyes and prayed for the first time in years, not for victory, just for peace, just for an end to the constant fear and helplessness. I didn't know then that an answer was coming. Not from prayer, maybe, but from the most unexpected source possible. The new patient arrived on Thursday morning. I heard the commotion from my room. A man's voice, deep and irritated, arguing with Janet about his rights and due process. I smiled a little despite everything. At least, I wasn't the only one fighting. His name was Harold. I met him at lunch in the common room. He was 78 years old with thick white hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. He sat at my table without asking, set down his tray, and said, "This food is terrible. How do you stand it?" "You get used to it." That's what they want. For us to get used to it. Get comfortable. Stop fighting. I looked at him more carefully. "You don't belong here either," he snorted. "My daughter seems to think I do. Says I can't live alone anymore. Says I'm a fall risk. I fell once, one time, tripped over my cat, and suddenly I'm incompetent." We ate in silence for a moment. Then Harold said, "What's your story?" I told him. Not everything, but enough. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "Financial abuse. Classic pattern. I've read about it. Used to be a patent attorney before I retired. You see a lot of human nature in that work. A lot of greed." The next day, Harold's daughter came to visit. I saw her in the common room, and something about her made me pay attention. She was in her early 50s, with gray streaked hair pulled back in a bun and wire-rimmed glasses. But it was her expression that caught me. She looked at the facility with suspicion, with anger barely contained. She noticed me watching and came over. "You're Harold's new friend?" "I suppose so. Your father seems like a good man." She smiled, but it was tight. "He's the best man I know, and he shouldn't be here. My brother put him in this place, claims Dad is losing it, but my brother just wants Dad's house and his savings." "I'm Grace, by the way. Grace Walsh. Ashley Peterson." We shook hands. Grace lowered her voice. "Between you and me, I'm a retired attorney. I spent my career fighting for elder rights, and something about this place stinks. The paperwork, the way they rush evaluations, it's all designed to keep people here, not actually help them." My heart started beating faster. "You don't belong here either, do you?" she asked. "No, I don't." "Tell me everything." I did. Right there in the common room, speaking quietly, I told Grace the whole story. About Amanda and Derek, the theft, the manipulation, the forged documents. About the guardianship hearing and the false medical records. About how I was trapped here while my daughter sold my life out from under me. Grace listened without interrupting. When I finished, she pulled out her phone and started taking notes. "How long until your final guardianship hearing?" 5 days. She looked up sharply. 5 days? We don't have much time. Can you help me? I can't represent you officially. I'm retired, and this isn't my jurisdiction anymore. But I know someone who can. My old law partner, Timothy Walsh. He specializes in guardianship abuse cases. Grace's fingers were flying across her phone screen. "But first, we need to find the cracks in Amanda's case. You said there was a power of attorney?" "Yes." "But I never signed it. When was it supposedly executed?" "I don't know exactly. She showed it at the hearing. It looked official. We need to see that document. And the medical records, everything Amanda submitted." Grace looked at me seriously. "Ashley, if we're going to fight this, we need your daughter to make a mistake. We need her to reveal herself. How do we do that?" Grace was quiet for a moment. Then her eyes lit up. "What if Amanda thought you were dying?" "What?" "Think about it. If she thinks you're dying, she might say things she wouldn't otherwise say. She might reveal her real motivations. We could record it. That's illegal, isn't it?" "Depends on the state. Illinois is a one-party consent state for recording. If you consent to recording your own conversation, it's legal." Grace leaned forward. "Look, I know this sounds extreme, but your guardianship hearing is in 5 days. Once that becomes permanent, it's almost impossible to reverse. We need leverage. We need Amanda to confess. What if it doesn't work? Then you're no worse off than you already are. But if it does work, we have everything we need to stop her. I thought about it, about the risk, about the slim chance it might actually succeed, about the alternative, which was spending the rest of my life in places like Pinewood, while Amanda spent my money and sold my home. Okay, I said, let's do it. Grace made some calls. She spoke to Timothy Walsh, who agreed to review my case. She got copies of the court documents using some kind of legal access I didn't understand, and she worked out the plan. The next day, Friday, Grace arranged for the facility to call Amanda with urgent news. Ashley has had a cardiac event. Her condition is critical. You should come immediately. I was lying in bed, hooked up to monitors that showed perfectly normal vital signs. But to anyone not looking closely, it looked serious. Amanda arrived within 30 minutes. Her face was flushed, her eyes wide, but I couldn't tell if it was concern or something else. The staff nurse said, "She's stable now, but it was touch and go for a while. We called her cardiologist. He's recommending immediate transfer to the hospital, but we wanted you to see her first." "Thank you. Can I have a few minutes alone with her?" "Of course." The nurse stepped out. Grace was supposedly visiting her father in another room. The recording device was hidden in the flower arrangement on my nightstand, positioned perfectly to capture audio. I kept my eyes mostly closed, breathing shallowly. Amanda stood beside the bed for a long moment. Then she leaned close. "Mom, are you awake?" I didn't respond. I heard her pull up a chair. For a few minutes there was silence. Then Amanda started talking, her voice soft. "You know, part of me thought this would be harder. I thought I'd feel guilty, but I don't. I really don't. Do you want to know why?" She paused, as if waiting for an answer. "Because you never really saw me. It was always about you and Dad, the perfect couple, the perfect life, and I was just there, on the sidelines. When Dad got sick, I took care of him for 2 years. 2 years of my life. And what did I get? A pat on the head and a thank you card. He left everything to you. Like I didn't matter." Her voice was getting harder. "So yeah, I forged that power of attorney. Got a friend from my old job in medical records to create your psychiatric history. It was easier than you'd think. People don't question official-looking paperwork. I've been stealing from you for 8 months now. $67,000 so far. Not enough to trigger any serious flags, but enough to keep Derek and me afloat." She laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "The house will sell for $450,000. After paying off the mortgage and closing costs, we'll clear about $320,000. I'm going to put you in Meadowview Gardens. It costs $2,000 a month. Your Social Security covers that. The rest of the money is mine. Finally mine." I wanted to open my eyes, to scream at her, but I kept still. Derek's family helped. They're stupid but loyal. They believed every word I told them about your decline. And that judge, Martinez, she was so easy to convince. Everyone always believes the concerned daughter. Nobody thinks a daughter would destroy her own mother. Amanda stood up, and I heard her moving around the room. "You're going to die soon anyway. Maybe not today, but soon enough. And when you do, I'll cry at your funeral. I'll talk about how hard I tried to help you, and everyone will feel sorry for me. The daughter who sacrificed so much for her difficult mother." I couldn't take it anymore. I opened my eyes. Amanda jumped back, hand to her chest. Then she saw my expression and understood. "You're not dying." "No, but I am recording this." Her face went white, then red. "You can't. That's illegal. Actually, in Illinois, It's perfectly legal to record your own conversation. I learned that from a friend. The door opened. Grace walked in with a tall man in a suit and a uniformed police officer. "Amanda Peterson," the officer said. Amanda lunged for the nightstand. Grace stepped in front of her. Timothy Walsh, Grace's law partner, held up his phone. "We have the recording, Miss Peterson, all of it. The confession to forgery, theft, fraud, and elder abuse. The officer is here to place you under arrest. This is a setup. You can't do this." "Actually, we can." Timothy's voice was calm. "We've also examined the power of attorney you submitted. It has a fatal flaw. It's dated March 15th of last year, correct? So, that date is 3 weeks before your mother opened the savings account you've been withdrawing from. You couldn't have power of attorney over an account that didn't exist yet when the document was signed." I saw understanding dawn on Amanda's face. She looked at me, and for the first time I saw fear. The officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for elder abuse, fraud, theft, and forgery. You have the right to remain silent." As he read her rights, Timothy was already on his phone with the courthouse. Within 2 hours, an emergency hearing was scheduled. The judge reviewed the recording, the evidence of the forged documents, and the testimony from Timothy Walsh. The guardianship was dissolved. I was released from Pinewood. A restraining order was placed against Amanda. But the officer had more news. When they searched Amanda and Derek's house, they found more evidence. Amanda had kept detailed records of everything she had stolen, like trophies. There were also forged documents for properties she planned to target next, and evidence that she had done something similar to Derek's elderly aunt 4 years ago. The aunt had died in a facility, and Amanda had inherited $40,000. Amanda's charges were upgraded to multiple felonies. She was facing 5 to 15 years in prison. I walked out of Pinewood Assessment Center at 7:30 that evening. Grace and Harold walked with me. Timothy followed, still on his phone, halting the house sale, freezing Amanda's access to my accounts. The night air smelled like freedom. The days that followed were strange. I was back in my house, but it felt haunted. Everywhere I looked, I saw signs of Amanda's occupation, her decorating choices, her rearranged furniture, her presence in every room. Dorothy flew in from Phoenix the day after I was released. She had been devastated when she learned the truth, horrified that she had believed Amanda's lies. We spent hours talking, crying, trying to understand how this had happened. "I'm so sorry," she said over and over. "I should have known. I should have questioned it." Amanda was convincing. That's how she got away with it for so long. Grace and Harold became regular visitors. Grace helped me navigate the legal mess Amanda had created. Timothy Walsh was handling the criminal case, but there were civil matters too, recovering the stolen money, reversing all the changes Amanda had made to my accounts and documents. Harold and I became unlikely friends. His son had backed off once Grace got involved, realizing he couldn't win. Harold was back in his own home with his cat, living independently just like he should be. The community response was mixed. Some neighbors were horrified and supportive. Others seemed embarrassed, like they didn't want to admit they had believed Amanda's lies. Phyllis apologized tearfully. The mailman stopped by with flowers. Dr. Ramirez from Pinewood called to apologize. He had been fooled by the forged medical records. He promised to implement new verification procedures. The hardest part was processing the betrayal. This wasn't a stranger or a casual acquaintance. This was my daughter, the child I had carried and raised and loved. I kept trying to find the moment it all went wrong. Was it something I did? Something I failed to do? Dorothy said no. This is about Amanda's choices, about her greed and her resentment. You didn't make her do this. But I was her mother. I should have seen it coming. How? Dorothy demanded. How do you see your own child plotting to destroy you? The trial preparation took weeks. Timothy explained what to expect. Amanda's lawyer was arguing diminished capacity, claiming Amanda had been under extreme stress and wasn't thinking clearly. It was a weak defense, but they had to try something. Derek filed for divorce the moment the evidence came out. Turned out he hadn't known the full extent of what Amanda had done. He thought they were just living rent-free, not that Amanda was systematically looting my accounts and planning to institutionalize me. When he learned the truth about what had happened to his aunt, he was horrified. Amanda's trial was set for November. I would have to testify, face her in court, tell the whole story in front of strangers. Timothy said my testimony would be crucial. Are you ready for that? He asked. I don't know, but I'll do it. October passed in a blur. I cleaned the house, removing every trace of Amanda. I repainted the walls. I bought new furniture. I was reclaiming my space. Grace helped me set up new safeguards. A new will, properly executed with multiple witnesses. A living trust. Powers of attorney for Dorothy and Grace both, requiring dual signatures for any major decisions. Security cameras. Better locks. I'm not going to be a victim again, I told Grace. Good. You shouldn't have to be. Timothy recovered most of the stolen money. $63,000 of the $67,000 Amanda had taken. The rest had been spent on legal fees for setting up the guardianship. The house evaluation confirmed it was worth $450,000, just like Amanda had said. It was strange to think that all of this pain had been about money, about greed, about a daughter who valued property more than her mother. In early November, the week before the trial, I finally allowed myself to grieve, not for what I had lost, but for what had never really existed. The daughter I thought I had. The relationship I believed was real. It had all been an illusion. I cried for 3 days. Dorothy held me. Grace visited with soup and quiet company. Harold called to check on me, and then I was done crying. I got up, washed my face, and prepared for trial. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Amanda sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back, her face carefully blank. She didn't look at me. The trial lasted 4 days. The prosecutor presented the evidence, the recording of Amanda's confession, the forged documents, the testimony from bank managers showing the unauthorized withdrawals. Doctor Ramirez testified about the fake medical records. Patricia, the social worker, testified about how convincing Amanda had been. I testified on the 3rd day. I told the whole story. Amanda's lawyer tried to shake me on cross-examination, suggesting I had been confused, that maybe I had given Amanda permission and forgotten. But Timothy had prepared me well. Did you give your daughter permission to forge your signature? He asked on redirect. No. Did you give her permission to create false medical records? No. Did you give her permission to steal $67,000? No. I never gave her permission for any of it. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, the verdict was guilty on all counts. Elder abuse, fraud, theft, forgery. At sentencing 2 weeks later, the judge gave Amanda 8 years in prison, plus full restitution of the stolen funds and all court costs. Amanda's face crumpled when she heard the sentence. She looked at me then, finally, and I saw something in her eyes. Not remorse, anger. She was angry that she had been caught, angry that her plan had failed, but not sorry for what she had done. I felt no triumph, only sadness. The daughter I had loved was gone, if she had ever really existed at all. After the sentencing, Timothy, Grace, Harold, Dorothy, and I went to lunch. We sat at a quiet restaurant and talked about the future. "What are you going to do now?" Grace asked. "Live. Really live. I'm 67 years old. I'm not going to spend whatever time I have left being afraid." Over the following months, I did exactly that. I joined an elder advocacy organization where Grace volunteered. We helped other people facing situations like mine, fighting guardianship abuse, protecting vulnerable seniors from exploitation. It gave me purpose. Every person we helped felt like a small victory against the kind of evil Amanda had represented. Dorothy moved to a condo 30 minutes away. We had dinner twice a week. We traveled together, seeing places Gerald and I had always talked about visiting. Grace and Harold became family. Real family. Not the kind based on blood, but on choice and respect and genuine care. The house stopped feeling haunted. I filled it with new memories. Dinner parties with friends, book club meetings, Grace's grandchildren running through the rooms. I kept the freezer well stocked with real food now. Every time I opened it and saw normal frozen meals instead of desperate evidence, I smiled. That freezer had saved my life, in a way. It had been my first act of fighting back. The trauma didn't disappear overnight. I still had nightmares sometimes. I still felt a flutter of panic when someone offered to help me with paperwork. I still checked my bank accounts obsessively, but I learned to recognize those feelings for what they were. Scars from a battle I had survived, and survival, I realized, was its own kind of victory. The greatest lesson I learned was about trust. Not that I shouldn't trust anyone, but that I should trust myself. I had known something was wrong. I had felt it in my gut, and I had been right. My instincts had tried to warn me, and I should have listened sooner. I learned that abuse can come from the people closest to you, that love can be twisted into manipulation, that the word family doesn't automatically mean safety. But I also learned that real family, real love, is about respect and care and genuine concern. It's about people like Grace and Harold and Dorothy who showed up for me when everything fell apart. Most importantly, I learned that you are never too old to fight for yourself, that your reality is valid even when everyone tells you you're wrong, that sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones you need protection from. And I learned that winning isn't always about triumph and justice. Sometimes it's just about surviving with your dignity intact, about reclaiming your life and refusing to be a victim. 6 months after the trial, I stood in my garden on a warm spring afternoon. The flowers Gerald and I had planted years ago were blooming. The sun was warm on my face. I could hear Grace and Harold laughing on the porch, arguing good-naturedly about something. I was at peace. Not because everything was perfect, not because the scars had disappeared, but because I had fought back and won, because I had reclaimed not just my house, but my dignity, my agency, my life. I had forgiven myself for not seeing Amanda's betrayal sooner, for the times I had doubted my own sanity, for the moments I had almost given up, and I had learned that the strongest thing you can do is refuse to be broken, to stand up even when you're terrified, to trust yourself even when everyone tells you you're wrong. I was 76 years old now, not 67. 9 years had passed since that day Amanda screamed at the freezer. She was still in prison with 2 more years left on her sentence. She had sent me one letter, which I had burned without reading. But I was here, in my home, surrounded by people who loved me, living fully, living freely. And every time I opened that freezer and saw nothing but frozen vegetables and ice cream, I smiled. Because I had won. Not against Amanda, but for myself. And that, I realized, was the most important victory of all. So let me ask you something. Have you ever had someone in your life who made you doubt your own reality? Someone who made you feel like you were crazy for trusting your instincts? Tell me your story in the comments below. You're not alone, and your reality is valid. If this story touched your heart or made you think, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories like this one, stories about survival and strength and refusing to give up. Share this with someone who might need to hear it. Someone who's fighting their own battle and needs to know they can win. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. And remember, you are never too old, never too broken, never too scared to fight for yourself. Trust your instincts. Trust yourself. And never, ever let anyone make you doubt your own worth. May you always have the courage to stand up for yourself, the wisdom to recognize manipulation, and the strength to reclaim your life when someone tries to take it from you. May your freezer always hold exactly what you put in it. And may you always, always trust yourself. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. And remember, surviving is winning.